cafe project. We actually hit the excellent time frame, so we hope that continues too in the future, but that was always one of our aims, to make sure that we gave the space, the cognitive space, and the physical time. So thank you again for your contribution, that was wonderful. And we move on to our final cafe conversation of the day. So I'd like to welcome Anita Krohn Traaseth, who is a chairwoman of several executive boards and former CEO of Innovation Norway, and she's a member of the European Innovation Council Advisory Board. So hello, welcome to today, and she'll be joined by Rune Todnem, who's Professor of Leadership and upcoming Chair of UNESCO Chair on Leadership, Innovation and Anticipation. So welcome to you both. And I've had a little heads up of some of the themes and discussions that will be happening, so I know that we're in for a treat. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Well, after listening to all these exciting conversations, we might throw our plans out the window. I don't know. We'll just see, Anita. Thanks for having us. We now finally got that UNESCO chair, working with Per and others at NIFU. Is really exciting work. It really, what Ulrike said is so important. I think you just threw a light on the opportunities and responsibilities we have in not only higher education, all education, formal and informal. And I'm thinking also what Real said, this is our time, we have a responsibility, and we're in, I don't know, in the middle, at the end, wherever, we're in a pandemic still. And I'm sitting at the university and I'm talking with colleagues all over the world, and we're looking forward to go back to status quo. Have we spent any time reshaping the content of what we are delivering or the methods of delivery? Are we still preaching the old truths? Are we still telling students these are the right answers and these are, of course, these are the right questions and these are the right answers? I think we have enormous opportunities. And every time I meet Anita, I think the first time we met was it was at the Norwegian summit. Every time, and I don't think she does this on purpose, but you don't get me to question myself, but you get me to question, what are we doing in higher education? What are we doing in our work with our collaborating partners out there? Because I am not quite sure or convinced that we're doing all we can do. We're very much using a heck of a lot of time, pardon my language, and resources, including human resources being managed, on conforming. We spend a lot of time producing research for journals that are included in particular lists and have particular impact factors. And this is not necessarily impact in society. This is how many times do we cite each other as professors sitting behind closed doors. So what I wanted to start with, Anita, if we can. So we're looking at futures literacy and exciting tools such as the labs. And we have a title with a focus on leadership and transformative change. Anita, what do you see as the potential future leadership challenges? And perhaps we're already in the future, but we're not talking 100 years from now, but from tomorrow. What are those leadership challenges?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, and just to give a comment also to Ulrike and to Real, because I find it really interesting, specifically the big shift that they are pointing out from having or taking on a responsibility, moving towards a deep, serious accountability side to it. It's not only becoming the CEO or having, like you said, Rune, doing the professor university stuff. You have to be accountable. And how accountable are we exactly by leveraging on the work we're doing now when we look at the future? So I obviously cannot see the future, but I can imagine and prepare for it. And I think that's key for future literacies. And that's why I also think that working in labs and scenarios are going to be even more important now in the future than it has ever been, because it's chaotic, and you don't do this to seek answers, you do it to prepare yourself. And I think you do it to find the right questions. And I think this is really a big shift. It's not the answers, it's the questions. So when I start trying to get this insight, I start by seeking a deeper understanding of the context that we're in. And to understand that context beyond my sector or my job, I like to use the Kondratiev cycles, the long waves of innovation that can be observed since the Industrial Revolution. And now that we are in the 6th innovation wave, and I think clearly this is a transition towards sustainable technologies and whole system designs, what you've just been talking about. And I think what's key in this wave, and this is also based on the conversation I had with you, Geraldine, I think you are so spot on when you say that a shift in this wave is the understanding that many of the previous technology and resources are hitting natural limits. Those limits were not in the first 5 waves. So economies now running old industrial models are going to find their inputs are not forever, not sustainable. Some are increasingly expensive. It's cutting into profits. And the key driver is climate and health. So even though there's more oil in the sea, the market, the people doesn't want it, you know? So this is a clear example of responsibility and accountability. And we're dealing with that paradox in Norway as a big oil exporter. At the same time, we are transitioning into new clean energy. And understanding that coexistence of a transformation, I think, should be something you should have a lab on, because it's obviously demanding. So that's what I do. And going back to your question, though, what does this represent in leadership challenges? I think transition demands a much higher focus on leadership versus administration. And for this model, I'm using Professor Cotter at Harvard, and he says that leadership produces change and movement. Management produces order and consistency. We need both, but if you want change and movement, you have to lead in a different way, because management produces planning, budgeting, organizing, staffing, controlling, problem solving. Like Cotter says, the world is overmanaged and underled. Transition, change, and innovation demands production of movement. Then you have to establish direction. How can you do that without scenarios? How can you create and clarify a big picture and set strategies with skipping the scenario part? For me, it's unbelievable. They go straight into the strategies for ways of doing it, and they don't look at the macro perspective. So that's number one. Number two, I think a challenge is leading, or obviously also for you, Rune, teaching a mix of different generation in the workforce. Because in these times, we have baby boomers, we have X and Ys, they have different expectations. And there were some researchers at a university in Norway doing some assessment of the bachelor students, and they are driven by values, and they are seeking commitment and loyalty redefined when you look at the baby boomers. So the understanding of what loyalty is, of what interdisciplinary work is. I mean, this is a leadership challenge, because you're going to lead the whole spectrum, and everybody's talking about diversity. But it takes skills to lead diversity, and those skills needs to be trained and talked at. And the third one, last one, is I think the leadership challenges that we're in, it will demand a closer relationship between leaders in private sector and public sector. It's not, innovation policies are not for public sector and politicians only. It has to be a much deeper integration with the private sector. And this is going to be challenging, you know, because they are two different worlds. But there's too many challenges that cannot be solved without private and public getting much closer. Yeah, I could talk about this for hours, but I think I stop it.
Oh, you won't stop, you just pause. That's brilliant. Fantastic. And of course, you mentioned, you referred to Kotter and the difference. I think it's really important difference between leadership and management. We have a challenge in Norwegian when I deliver on executive MBA, because we hear leadership. We think it is the same. And then it's clever, well-experienced people. And this is perhaps the first time. And my screen went dark. This is perhaps the first time they talk about or have ideas around the difference. And like you said, Anita, it isn't either or. It isn't necessarily one is more important. You need both in society and organizations, but it's not the same. Meaning it's not necessarily the same people, the same skills we're looking at. I'm going to mention another author for those interested in the literature. So we have Burns, that a long time ago wrote the book called Leadership in '78. And he said, perhaps we know all too much about our leaders and all too little about leadership. So this is I kind of looked at my own childhood and I was reading Se og Hør. It's like gossiping. So who are the leaders? What do they wear? What is the latest haircut? Or what car are they driving? Where did they go on holiday? Of course, not this year. And his words, what are they doing in the bedroom? Yeah, but then we forget what is leadership. Also, in my conversations with students, young and older, is I asked them to define leadership. And I said, don't give me someone else's definition. Give me your definition. And they say, yeah, okay. And everyone is writing down a definition. And 9 out of 10, they don't define leadership. They define leaders. And very often these are individuals that achieve something through someone else. It sounds rather painful to me. And we're talking about leaders and followers. But if we're looking at the future and the changes that we are already experiencing, who do you see as the new leaders, or who do you see as the individuals performing leadership? How do they perform this leadership and where?
I think when it comes to who, I think it's clear that it's not the establishment who is driving the leadership. It can be anyone. I mean, it could be a Swedish young schoolgirl at the age of 14 driving it, like Greta Thunberg. It could be, and it sure is, big, massive institutions like EU being brave enough to carve out the new Green Deal of Europe. And I've been part of the European innovation work the past 2 years. I have to say, Rune, I'm shocked. I thought, Brussels and EU, that's not the place for being innovative. That's not the place where things are being moved. But I have a similar story, like I think Ulrika in her introduction, because when I was coming to this board of 22 innovators in Europe, the chairman of the board, Mark Ferguson, he's Irish, he's an Irish professor and also an advisor to the Irish government. He stood up, all these tables were white cloth, it was really high level, and he stood up and he looked at us and he said, now you have a license to misbehave. And I was like, really? Have I come home? Did I have to leave Norway to misbehave? Is Brussels a place I can misbehave? It was such a cool, he set, his leadership, his way of setting the tone at the top was just excellent. So I think it will be a combination of people who's not even born yet to institution that's really had to step up. And maybe it's not popular to say it. I don't think any Norwegians or anyone wanted the Brexit, not even the Brits. But what Brexit did was maybe to really get EU to step up. Don't take anything for granted anymore. Okay, they've been part of these relationships for years, but things might change and we cannot explain why. Why has it changed? Maybe with scenarios, we could have been even more thought forward on this. So I think it will be a combination, Rune, those who have a message, those who both have responsibility and are willing to take the accountability, they will be followed. And it's not about, like you said, a person or an institution. It can be both. And where I think we're witnessing a massive power shift, at least in business where I come from. Because if you look at the lifespan of companies from the early 70s until now, there's an index who's been following the 500, it's called the S&P index, following the 500 top companies in the US. And their lifespan has gone down from approximately 70 years, and they are expected to live 14.1 years within 2030. That means things that we believe are going to last forever is not. And the drivers for innovation, the drivers for change are the SMBs and the startups. And when you combine that with technology and social media tools that are free, that can reach anyone, instant action, cross countries, flexibility from wherever, the impact and the shift and the change happens more unexpectedly than we can imagine. And then the third part, how? I think the leaders, what they will do in the future, they will spend much more time on understanding the drivers. As I said, to prepare more than plan. We got to stop all this planning. We got to be prepared. We have to learn how to navigate in uncertainty. Use the scenarios for questions. Lead more than administrate. And look for new and unexpected partners you never thought you would be connecting with. I think those are the ones we should have a look at.
Brilliant. And it reminds me about something in the field of, we talk about leadership and change, and we spend so much time talking about change resistance and change barriers, rather than, you know, another set of literature that is change readiness. Yes. So let's build change readiness for the unknown. We might not know what we're building readiness for, but it sure will be something. Well, we hope it will be something. We're getting to the end of our session. We could keep on for a long time, as could before us, but Geraldine is keeping a strict watch on the.
Well, I'm allowing you 3 more minutes, so you know.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you. but we're getting to our planned end here. So we were asked to provide or to end our conversation with some specific advice, if we have any, that is, some specific advice to future leaders and others who are interested in, motivated to contributing to leadership. So I have jotted down 5, but you first, Anita, because you already on a row here.
Yeah, I think you probably could combine the 2 lists that we've talked about. I think a key thing is for leaders to spend time on perspective and direction much more than strategies. If you lose on spending time on understanding the macro picture and link it then to your company or institution, and then actually spend time on explaining why you are transforming, and the how will develop along the way. We are so eager to get into the how and get into the plans and the strategies that so I think that's a tip number 1. Spend more time on perspective and direction. And then secondly, of course, coming back to be much more aware of the distinction between management and leadership when you form the teams or when you hire people. And this is a clear message to owners and boards. They are responsible for recruiting the right leader profiles into the different roles that the companies are facing. They have to evaluate all the time. Do we have the right competencies around the table? It's about the competencies. It's about the character, the profile, more than how many other companies has he or she been CEO for. It has to be related to the task. And then third, to really keep at a personal level very interested and updated way beyond your own sector. And I think, like you say, Rune, we will see a change in the education system. We will go for lifelong learning, interdisciplinary education. It will be ageless in the future. I think the model of us being a student finished when we're 24 or 26, it's sick, you know, because everything's changing in a path, in a complexity that I would say at least every 5th year, we should have what I call a radical sabbatical to learn stuff. It should be part of how we work. It should be part of the deal, because also the generation of young people today, they don't stay in the companies for 20 years. It's not a goal for them, you know. So when I tell them that I maximum stay in companies for 5 years, they're like, 5 years, that's long. While the leaders above me say, 5 years, that's not too long, you know. So I think we need to make sure that we have shorter seminars. It doesn't have to be all about the diplomas, you know. It's about the knowledge and the characters and the ability to solve things. And I think as a tip number 4, the last one, get a grip on the 6th wave. Understand sustainability, climate, health, technology, security. These are key words that any leaders should be able to discuss much more than Excel and numbers and KPIs, because this is connected to why are we making the choices we are making. And you'll have so much more interesting, some of the more interesting discussions I've had on strategy and leadership has been with people who have no education in that field. They are historians, philosophers, you know, even priests. You know, I'm not a religious person, but they have perspectives that's needed to prepare for the future, not plan for it, prepare for it.
Brilliant, thank you, Anita. So I will throw in a couple of mine then before we are running out of time. I can see Geraldine is nodding. I got approval. That's good, thank you. I think, and we have a lot of similar ideas here. I think one of the things I like to think about, and sometimes I'm stepping or perhaps jumping on toes, is when I walk into a room of executives, and one of the first things I say is leaders are not important. Leadership is. Because one of the challenges today that a lot of formal leaders, they don't necessarily provide leadership. They don't necessarily make decisions. They don't necessarily have a purpose that is big enough. But there are many people who might see themselves as contributing or undertaking leadership who couldn't give that much about the title. I was going to say something rude there, but yeah, the title is not important. So I think we need to focus more on the act of leadership that we can all contribute to. And on that, I would also suggest, and I have suggested, that leadership is a responsibility of the many, not the privilege of the few. That is also something, we have this kind of class system in our organizations, in society, and very, very quickly we end up in discussions about us and them. No matter where we are, it's us and them. And that's not a very good starting point to try to deal with shared challenges. I think also in my work, I write a lot about purpose and core values. It's really beyond me when I meet people in executive MBA classes and they never discussed purpose before. If they have, they are religious individuals, and I envy them that. But you shouldn't have to be religious to have a purpose in life. I think we all have a purpose in life, and I'm not judging good or bad. It's just, what is this purpose? And as an organization, we should have a purpose, and we should have core values informed by the purpose, and these core values should inform all our decision making. I also think, getting to the end here, I also think it's really important that we start focusing much more on ourselves, every one of us, and our own identity and our authenticity, rather than going through all these courses trying to be someone we are not. So if I have an ambition to become a CEO, I need to look like that and talk like that. And then you have these meeting sessions or kind of party games. Oh yeah, she said that or he said that. Innovation, yeah, tick. Entrepreneurship, yes, tick. Sustainability, tick. We don't say it necessarily because we mean it, but because they're buzzwords. And then finally, I'm ending, I think, in the same place as you, Anita. It's like, the owners has a huge responsibility here. So who are we promoting and who are we hiring for the top job as a CEO or what it is? Because very often the owners are hiring people that conform and they avoid risk. And they like planning because planning have taken them where they are in their career. Yeah. So of course, they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing what they've been told by the whole system, including universities, including politicians, including research councils. They're doing what they've been taught to do. So I think much more focus on the role of the owners. Yeah. And with that, I think we're handing back to you, Geraldine.
Thank you. That was extremely energizing and inspiring, and so much food for thought. And I know we will be following up that conversation with the blog as well for the audience. So we'll definitely be putting in the advice and the tips and some of the examples that you gave us. So one of the key messages to come out of the last two conversations have been dare to think and dare to act. And yeah, I myself have found this all really intriguing, so I hope our audience have, and that you've all finished your lunch and are ready for our next session on developing futures literacies as a capability. I'm not sure if I'm passing back to Vicky or Lisa here, so